Cahirirlach gasas Seanseo cum cúis na Cóileoirí Carroh mar deartha. First of all, may I say, Cahirirlach, that cities are where the vast majority of people will spend their lives into the future. They're places, so the quality of life of city dwellers is hugely important and a core part of our responsibility. Inclusive neighbourhoods, designed for that population, for children, for young people, for older people, for people who live and work in cities. And it is to our local authorities that the responsibility for inclusive design, inclusive neighbourhoods and communities falls. And we do a good job. Our urban local authorities do a really good job. But I suppose the question arises, do they do a job that is based on sound principles of local democracy? And I have to say, ask the question, is their ethos one of meaningful local democracy? Is power and influence decentralised from government to local institutions to allow those local authorities to do that job in a meaningful way? And the answer is a resounding no. And many colleagues have expounded on this here and on other days, and I won't go into it again. It's well documented in the Council of Europe Monitoring Report and in the AILG's research in Maynooth University. And I fully support those assessments. I would like to just mention 2 or 3 practical points where I feel this issue comes into play in particular. There are threats to local democracy from without and within. The ones from within are the ones we really should take seriously in terms of dealing with everyone in this room and outside it who has a responsibility for governance and government. And first thing I would like to make reference to is the policy-making function of the councillor. The councillors' reserve functions are the means by which we exercise our democratic governance. But the ease with which these can be removed by ministers and with no solid case based on evidence is a fundamental threat to local democracy in my view. And the councillor's policy remit in relation to local policy should be the subject of an in-depth review to clarify, strengthen and protect the policy-making function and restrain the power of ministers to restrict and remove reserve functions. For example, in the area of housing, and I hope you would make that the subject of a recommendation. Secondly, there is a question of how policy is made in the first instance and what is the local influence on policy making. Who influences national policy? And certainly I would have to say, Cahirirlach, not us. Our experience and our local communities are ignored as a rich source of input into policy making. We have no structured mechanism to bring our experience to bear on national policy. The top-down model prevails. Through our representative bodies, the AILG, we do get invited into working groups and so on, and that's very welcome. But this is unstructured at the discretion of the centre, and routinely recommendations, especially on legislative matters, are ignored, while other very well-resourced interest groups can seem to have an unequal influence on policy. The third point is in relation to ministerial powers, and I have to say, Cahirirlach, this is the one that concerns me most. It is one of the most concerning developments that the Section 28 powers of ministers have now been given such mandatory force. They undermine local planners, they undermine the governance role of local representatives, and by extension, the citizens' rights. And when we talk about design of our urban spaces, of course we and our citizens know what we need, but our powers in terms of our local county development plans are being eroded. And while you are making your recommendations and working on your recommendations, which we all greatly look forward to, even before those recommendations have ink, you will be voting on a planning bill that will leach and strip away the powers of local democracy and local government. So there is a challenge for you and your colleagues long before your recommendations are written, I would suggest. And that is a question for you. I support the recommendations in relation to funding, and I would say in relation to not just area chairs, but the fact that there's legal discrimination against urban councillors because we have no municipal districts with the legal backing of municipal districts. Our area committees have no legal force at all. And finally, I would just like to make the point that the balance of power between the councillors and the executive is a very tricky issue it needs to be looked at, and I would say, for my own part, I do not support the concept of a directly elected mayor. I will actively canvass against it. I believe we'll be swapping one kind of an executive for another, and we will have an elected executive taking us in a scary way down the road of the Americanisation of Irish politics. And lastly, we ourselves as councillors have to take responsibility for the way we behave and how we exercise our governance function in the chamber. I believe the model of a governing group and an opposition group in the chamber is a lazy copying of the Dáil model. It doesn't do us any justice. It puts us against each other instead of working together toward the executive and holding them to account. And we really should think again about how we sort ourselves out and work in the chamber. Thank you.